serious now, because there has been, well, at the Edinburgh Festival, a joke, which frankly wasn't funny, and a reaction to the joke, which was even less so. So this is the comedian Reginald D Hunter, and he made a pretty crass joke talking about his watching a Channel 5 documentary about domestic abuse, and he said that as a woman told her story of how she was ill-treated by her husband, he thought to himself, my God, it's like being married to Israel. Well, you know, not funny to joke about domestic violence, not really funny to joke about what's going on in the Middle East either. But you know, when it comes to comedy, I guess, you know, gloves should be off and no holds barred, I suppose. Although I'm pretty sure if he had made the joke and changed the word Israel for Hamas or Palestine, then there would have been confected outrage. But actually, there were two audience members who didn't find it funny because it was extremely poignant and upsetting to them, two Israeli audience members who just said, not funny. Right, so that should have been the end of that, and then move on and make some more jokes. But no. Instead, these two audience members were sworn at. They were called genocidal. They're told, you're not welcome, by spectators who started shouting, you know, the robo reaction to everything these days. Oh, we're going to discuss immigration. Free Palestine! Free Palestine! You know, it's just like the only words some people seem to know how to say at the moment. And were basically driven out. And not only were they driven out and being told, F off, and people shouting expletives at them, slow hand caps, boos, cries of genocidal maniac and you're not welcome. Instead of actually, the man on the stage, you could have just said, come on, guys, this is ridiculous. That's, you know, horrific. No, he turns around and adds to it and says, you can say it's not funny to you, but if you say it's a room full of people who laughed, you look foolish. The couple, one of whom was actually disabled, then exited before Hunter apparently openly laughed at them and fellow audience members continued to jeer. Now substitute that particular tableau I have just painted with any other two people from any other country, particularly an ethnic minority, and all of a sudden people would probably be having their collars felt by the police and end up in Sir Keir Starmer's mega prison. Look, I don't know what to say about this other than it's blimmin' well horrific. I want to speak now to Jake Wallis-Simons, who's the editor of the Jewish Chronicle and author of Israelophobia. I mean, Jake, how have we got to this stage? How are people just becoming so brainwashed, so cultified with the whole Free Palestine stuff that they can't see that the way they are behaving is monstrous?
I think that's right, to be honest. It feels like there's one rule for certain ethnic minorities and an entirely different rule for Jews. You know, Reginald D Hunter himself is a black comedian. He's very used to playing to white audiences, sometimes to being the only black person in the room. And as you mentioned, one can only imagine how it would have gone down had the two ethnic minority people in the audience been black rather than Jewish and subjected to barracking and abuse and hounded from the theatre. And look, I think for the takeaway that I take from this, partly, is how brave they were. Those two people in the audience, their country, their culture, their people are being submitted to or subjected to smears, slurs, and awful insults. And they stood up and said, not funny, even though one of them is disabled, and then were hounded out, but refused to bow to the pressure of the mob. And I think that that's an example to those of us who share their correct moral compass and don't subscribe to this two-tier racism that seems to have infected much of society, beginning with the progressive left, to stand up and to be braver and to say that that's not acceptable, not in Britain, not anywhere, and we're going to stand up against it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I know a great number of Jews, and it's incredible, the mettle of a great many Jewish people, because they've lived through things, they've seen things, they've suffered things, and they're able, frankly, to compose themselves with dignity and integrity in such situations, and a credit they are. I'm going to ask you something that's, I don't know, when you see everything going on right now and the way things have progressed, and we were told, weren't we, by Sir Keir Starmer, I've got rid of all the anti-Semites from my party. And then you see scenes like this, and there's never a quick rush to condemn things, is there, anymore, from political leaders? It's almost like a willingness to go along and say, well, that's fine, that's just what we do now. And when you see this huge uptick in Israelophobia, the title of your book there, and other things that are going on today, do you ever think to yourself, what's emerging here? Have lessons of history not been learned? Because we're starting to live in a time that to me seems pretty dystopian and pretty dark all of a sudden, which has echoes of the past. And much like those sort of echoes of the past that we've seen before, anti-Semitism is somehow at the heart of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, for me, like for most Jewish people, we have two conflicting impulses. The first is a sort of weariness that the weight of Jewish history over the last 2,000 years has shown that in time after time and place after place, just when Jews have become accepted and felt like we're safe, suddenly the majority turns on them with great bloodletting and prejudice and bigotry and marginalization. And they're chased out or have to hide or massacred or raped or mutilated or whatever. That's the one fear. The other thing is the hope that actually Britain's different and that we do belong here. You know, my grandfather fought for this country. Many of that experience is shared by many Jewish people in Britain. And we almost don't really want to believe that we're going through the same cycle once again, as has happened again and again throughout history. And whether my former impulse or my latter impulse proves to be correct really depends upon many of the people who are watching this program right now, many of the great British public, the silent majority that we hear so much about. The question really is, when will they stop being silent? And when will they start to stand up for this, patriotic and law-abiding, yet oppressed minority that plays by the rules and wants to do the right thing, and yet ends up constantly the butt of jokes by people like Reginald Hunter and being hounded out of theatres, art, synagogues and places of, congregation being attacked and vandalised. Whether, the British, the pen of history lies in the hands of the British people now, the great silent majority. Are they going to find their voices or not?
Do you know, I absolutely agree. And it is a silent majority, and we must always remember that. And I think it is important we start speaking out on all of this. Where does this come from? OK, you talk about the cycles in history, where this abhorrent behaviour rears its head again and again. What is the driving force behind that? And look, I'm no, World War II historian, but I was thinking about this the other day, about the relationship between the left wing and extreme forms of the left wing and Islam, right? And they seem to have, throughout history, found times that all of a sudden the enemy's enemy is their friends, that they sort of team up together. And that is when we see things happen as they are happening today. Is there any basis in truth of the connection I'm drawing here or not, do you think?
Absolutely. It's been called the Red-Green Alliance, the red being the socialists and the left, and the green, of course, being the Islamists. And it's been developing since the Cold War, since the decolonization movement, with thinkers like Frantz Fanon and Edward Said. And that's really the point at which the anti-colonial movement of the Islamist world, or the Islamic world, which had an Islamist component to it, sort of meshed with the left wing of the progressives within the democratic world, and then the sort of point of connection with the Soviet Union. So in the sort of 60s and 70s, that relationship really began to develop, whereby, from the point of view of the progressive left, the fact that you're against capitalism is the main thing. Whether you're an Islamist fanatic murderer comes secondary. You're okay. You're on the right side of history, as they would see it. And so that sort of that kind of what do you call it? Symbiosis developed back then, and we see it playing out today in the TikTok age in our universities. That hard left, old-fashioned Soviet ideology coming through, given rocket boosters by social media, embraced by people like Jeremy Corbyn, and then disseminated to the younger generation who become infatuated with him. And the problem really is exhibited, week after week in the Gaza marches today, whereby, Israel is seen as the white capitalist colonialist oppressor, even though all those things aren't true of Israel. Least of all that it's right. White, of course, it's white. But it's seen as that, and opposed by people who see themselves as being on the side of the socialist, anti-capitalist, anti-colonialist movement, allying with Islamic extremists. It's a real sort of ideological tangle.
It's a madness is what it is, Jake. Listen, it's always a really massive pleasure for me talking to you. Keep up your good work, and we're going to sort of keep fighting the good fight. We're on your side all the way. And, you know, it's about time we silent majority Brits did find our voice and call things out when we find them wrong. Jake Wallis-Simons.